Thank you very much, Zoom overlords. And I'm gonna switch. Well, welcome everybody near and far via Zoom and Facebook. For anybody who may not know me, I'm Megan Marshall and I'm the director of the UC Hyde Living Writers series. We're in the first few days of National Women's History Month, and I feel like it's only fitting that tonight's featured reader is a fierce woman poet. But before I get into introducing her, I do want to take a chance to thank those who have helped to support the series this semester and every semester, and that includes, of course, our friends at Love Library, the fabulous Markle Tumlin, who is co-hosting with me this evening, Danya Mukahal, Laurel Bliss, Jessica Savala, and Rebecca Williamson, as well as the Department of English and Comparative Literature. And a special shout out to Dr. Bill Noricchio, SDSU Press, and the MALAS program for their support of tonight's event. Just a couple reminders, if you're joining us via Zoom, please keep your mic muted during the presentation, and then you'll have a chance to unmute and ask questions a little bit later. And as you may have heard, or for those of you who just joined us, this event is being recorded. And then lastly, if you have a chance, please check out the UC Hyde Living Writers series on YouTube. Our channel has recordings of all of our wonderful events, as well as creative responses and perspectives from SDSU students who are enrolled in the Living Writers class. So basically just a wealth of entertaining and informative videos there. And then if you'd like some more information on the other events that we have coming up later this semester, go ahead and check out the SDSU MFA community website. And I put the link in the chat a little bit earlier, so you can click on that and you'll be able to see and to register for the events that we have coming up. So without further ado and announcements, I'm excited to introduce our featured writer for the evening. Now, usually when I introduce our authors, I'll take their bios, from their websites and sort of edit them a little bit for length, and then to hit on, their important achievements and highlights of their work and their career. And then I add a personal anecdote and maybe a little blurb about their book. But tonight, I wanted to share this poet's bio exactly as it reads verbatim from her website, because I feel like it captures the spirit of her work, which has been revered as fearless and full-throated. And it also reads just like a powerful poem in and of itself. Sara Borjas, a Chicanx Pocha, is from the Americas before it was stolen and its people were colonized, and is a Fresno poet. Say their names. Her debut collection of poetry, Heart Like a Window, Mouth Like a Cliff, was published by Noemi Press in 2019 as part of the Akrilica series and received a 2020 American Book Award. Tony McDade. Sara was named one of Poets and Writers 2019 debut poets, is a 2017 CantoMundo Fellow, and is the recipient of the 2014 Blue Mesa Poetry Prize. Dominique Remy Fells. Her work can be found in Ploughshares, The Rumpus, Poem a Day by the Academy of American Poets, and The Offing, amongst others. Sandra Bland, Ahmaud Arbery. She believes that all Black lives matter and will resist white supremacy until Black liberation is realized. Lives in Los Angeles, now in Fresno, back in Fresno. Justice for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and countless others. She digs oldies, outer space, aromatics, and tiny prints, and is about decentering whiteness in literature, creative writing, and daily life. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sara Borjas.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you for reading the bio too. I feel like people are always like, so step one, and I'm glad to be in an institutional space that's not afraid to read the names of Black people that have died by the hands of white supremacy. And I feel like that, honestly, you're right, sets the tone. And I'm really grateful before I read anything to Megan and all the communication you've done with me to get this going, to Carla, on the back end, inviting me down to San Diego, to all the departments and all the money that goes into it. It's not like a small feat to curate a reading especially in an institutional space. Sometimes I feel like it's like way harder. So I just want to recognize the labor that you're doing, and thank you for doing it. I'm going to read some poems to you guys live from Fresno, from my bedroom, so it's my first reading from my bedroom back at my folks' house. And so this is probably the most intimate space I have ever been in with this many people. I'm going to read from my collection and read a new poem or two as well. This first poem, I feel like, kind of lays the geography of what I feel I'm contending with when I write any poem. It's an Ars Poetica, which, if you're unfamiliar, an Ars Poetica is just a poem that lays out the principles of poetry for that poet. I'm a Fresno poet. There's a tradition of Fresno poets. And there's also, I think, a tradition of, I don't know, I guess a male-centered Chicano canon. And so I understand that I'm contending with that, and that that's the lineage I'm working in. Yeah, Barbara, the page number is 71. Ars Poetica. In my Fresno, there are no prerequisites, just a frontage road inside the fence flopped to the west. Craft means white aesthetics, and the canons are obsolete, extinct. Anyone charging admission is an endangered gatekeeper playing dress up with belts and polo shirts. Here, poets rest between crop rows, welting the earth's still dust like corduroy. Craft is twisted grapevine and a swirling fly. On one side, almond trees, pistachios, field worker housing spray painted with ads. The fervent recall of history from poets in the tradition hovers in the moment the door opens, calling down some half-lit hallway, clinging to the master's house. Old dog. Eventually, I was a poet. I'm saying it here now. I did not even believe some poems. I will not praise the poems about how second male enlightenment, or that confessing I can hear the brown and black whores calling my name vindicates a Chicano's colonized mind. Although I tried to love once and ended up punching everybody is one of my favorite lines from Fresno. You see, on the other side of my Fresno is orange groves and aqueducts and hills evolving into a majestic mattering. The view from the mountains is trucks, dogs, oldies, dusk. I do not believe Andres Montoya wanted his book to operate as a fence or a container. I cannot recite the lines of Alarista at a party or at the Dean's annual diversity dinner, but I was a poet before the books. Fresno is not a machine. It does not produce tenderness from the oppressed, from the farm worker, the housewife, the newly educated Chicano, like cotton gins or dive bars or Morrissey lyrics. Here, there are as many songs as silences, piled deep into soil until it becomes rock. Latinos beautiful as a basket of eyelashes, our eyes full as the packed back of a pickup. I can be kind through my anger and my intense hope. I can be honest as strawberry paletas or water feeding the lawn all day long. I can show you my wounds, each candle my mother lights before she drinks, my father's machismo, and my struggle to say I am guilty of both, my stubborn and revolving logic. Each time I admit I want or deserve a name of my choice, My breath has to throw down with this ancestral stutter. These poetics are the Sanchas of Duende that no one acknowledges, and the ants that gossip over the landline. The alfalfa field remains mysterious. The junk in the yards is as blinding as light breaking into the crest of the Nevadas. But I'm not a genealogist. I do not enjoy certainty. I do not love loyalty. If you ask me, Larry Levis owes my grandma's denial for teaching him to meander. I'm not the scholar of the crop row, the unsung corrido of Pinedale, the historian of hoods or philosopher of feral cats in packing houses. I am not an inheritor. I'm a chatty tradition pushing from the inside of its tin. I'm the scrape of the lowrider as it exits the driveway, bothering the neighbors. I'm the ambitious orange head of a kinglet, raising questions from ash trees. And if you don't know, Fresno is the name of the ash tree. Hence the ash trees. So my mom's from Texas, and she drove when she was younger, doing farm work, ended up ultimately in Fresno. But she looks just like my grandpa. So this poem is a little bit about that journey. So if you don't know Spanish, tortilla quemada means like burnt tortilla, and cara de mierda means shit face. Well, I know the name of the desert, and it's after David St. John. There's a desert inside my mother's iris, a flesh-colored truck rambling through miles of packed dirt, where my grandmother is leaving my grandfather, driving away with all his kids. Dirt rises and fails along a road in El Paso. Sand freckles underneath tires. 8 small hands wring like rags. My grandma reaches across the cab over 3 of her daughters to slap my mother across her face. She calls her tortilla quemada, cara de mierda, because she has my grandfather's big teeth, wide canyon mouth, cheeks like hot, empty plains. My mother would rather cut off her hands than hit me. She would rather swallow box Chardonnay, open her throat like a rusty silo for rain, light a candle for a girl she knows, and turn this evening into a watermelon sliced, a rest stop where she is allowed to play. In her iris, there is a desert. There is a girl who does not cry, a woman who wonders what she did wrong. I'm a daughter who walks through a desert carrying my mother's wounds, each open palm across her child's face. Each time a man offered her something he did not have. I trudge a lineage of exiled desire, thirsty. I love my mother by drinking her cheap wine with her. I bend down in the sand, lap my own sinking steps. So something I also do, or I also have done for a long time, is bartend. I feel like, sometimes my students are like, oh man, like, what am I going to do? Just, I'm like, have a secondary trade, whatever that trade may be, because one thing I don't ever want to do is write something specifically because I needed money. I want to write it and protect the integrity of my heart or my mind or whatever it is. And so if I can like protect myself and do that another way, then I have a little bit more freedom. That being said, I do write a lot about being in bars and alcoholism and drinking. And so I've been thinking a lot about it more lately. So I'm going to read this poem, which is on page 57, and it's called Narcissus Contemplates Ordering Another Drink at the Bar. I wear headphones at the bar and feel fine. I'm not the one twisting the cap. In Fresno, my grandfather is dying from his overworked liver. A machine plucks the mess from his blood. His arm like a stream of nights where my father, then a boy, opened his beers. And my mother is drinking a box of Chardonnay, listening to the same lyrics in the backyard, Frampton singing, "No one to relate to except the sea. We don't need water to drown." The bartender senses these types of things. At Al-Anon, they say, don't say alcoholic. Say, I have a problem with someone else's drinking. I count what my mother does for herself. Measures her drinking water in her Starbucks cup. Watches family comedies full of white people living in 2-story homes. Eats a seized candy she stashes in the cracked leather ottoman for each tax season, where my father refuses to buy her a Lexus or finally take her on their honeymoon. My father counts the seconds between his father's final wet breaths, a gurgling that rises from the bottom of machista, chicanismo, lineage of anchors. I have a dream where I'm a river. My mother's hands rumpled on the floor like petals in a light, pleasant, never-ending wind. The wind flows like liquid out of my mouth. Each excuse I make when I drink. Measure, I say, is a way of justifying what we want. I tell myself 3 drinks. I shame my mother for her box Chardonnay, so I don't have to admit what bothers me most is her loneliness and how well my father, like this bartender, overpours it. So this, my, like I said, my family, it's like a lineage of farm workers, and I've really been thinking about like what I'm eating and where my food's coming from every time I'm eating, which is also like, damn, how come I didn't do this my whole life, right? How come I was like thanking God and not thanking the people who made this food possible? And I think the more like I accept and understand like some of the work and like the experiences that come along with like being conscious of that is understanding like my own family. And so my dad, he hates peaches because he used to pick peaches, and he's like not down because he says like the fuzz, if anybody has ever picked peaches here or knows, he says it gets stuck in your pores, like you can scrub your hands and they will not come out. And then my mom loves peaches, so it like really sucks in growing up because my mom would love to have them and would hide them sometimes, and my dad would see them and throw them away. And it just makes me think about the kind of things I don't know and all the trauma that I also don't know too. That kind of lets me like hold unrealistic expectations for my mom and dad, and thus also like not love them fully because I don't really know who they are. I'm still holding on to who I want them to be. This poem is like the attempt at that And it's called Lies I Tell. A woman has a window in her face. That is the truth. I look like my mother. That is the truth. I want to tell you I'm not like her. That is the truth. I'm ashamed walking in a woman's body. That is the truth. I wish to take back everything I say. That is the truth. A window can be a mirror. It can also be a door. That is the truth. As a girl, my mother slept in a shack with no windows and one door. That is the truth. My grandma would slam windows. Truth. A mother's hands are stronger than God. Truth. We often use fruit to describe a bruise, like plum or blackberry. Truth. My mother's window, blackberried. Truth. My mother's door, peached. Truth. She loves peaches. That is the truth. My father could not stand them in our house. That is the truth. We had 3 doors and 9 windows in our house. That is the truth. A woman has a face in her window. Truth. A father has a window, but I don't know where it is. Truth. What burrows is the peach fuzz, he says. That is the truth. I have never been close enough to a peach to eat one. Truth. The worst things last on the skin. Truth. I don't like not having things. Truth. Not all windows open. Truth. One night, I see my father crying in the yard, head in his hands. That is the truth. I make things up that I want for myself. That is the truth. All right, I'm gonna line it up and read this poem about this place I made up and I hope one day exists, but it's called Pocha Cafe, and it's a cafe where all the pochas get to go and kick it. If you don't know what a pocha is, it's a derogatory term for a whitewashed Mexican or a Mexican who has lost or forgotten their heritage. And Mexicans will call other Mexicans that. All my homegirls would call me that, and I didn't know what it meant because I don't really speak Spanish, so I would just be like, oh. And then years later, when I looked it up on like Urban Dictionary, I was like, oh, okay, like they were talking shit this whole time. And then I was like, well, they're not wrong. And then I also, I think through writing this book and just thinking all the time generally about how I'm reading everything, how I'm living, how I'm responding to other people's work. I'm like, well, it is true. I am a very assimilated, I do center whiteness in my own aesthetics, but I also understand it's not my fault. If you're educated in the United States, then you too are centering, a white canon. And so I was like, well, where can I go and be accepted knowing this? And what would I do there? What would all the other pochas do there? And I figured this is what we might do. So it's called Pocha Cafe. Here, we use Cholula, not homemade salsa. We'll serve corn tortillas with your bacon and eggs. You can ask what is in everything instead of just eating it. We know you pochas love to do that. Enjoy a quesadilla with American cheese. Or nachos we prepare in our brother's hand-me-down microwaves that he gave us when he joined the Air Force. Or just a flour tortilla spread with butter. Here we listen to War, Smokey, Selena, The Smiths, and Art LeBeau. Let's dedicate everything to our incarcerated cousins serving bullshit sentences in Wasco and Corcoran and Chowchilla state prisons, though we never put money on their books or write them. At Pocha Cafe, we play blood in, blood out, and stand and deliver, and mistake someone's dad on the daily for Edward James Olmos. Even we think all Mexicans look alike, or that all Latinos are Mexican. And that's why our Salvadoran and Boricua homies talk shit, but that's what people do when they love you, so fuck it. If you're a downright cultural traitor, come on in. Here at Pocha Cafe, we only order rice and don't speak Spanish so we don't get corrected, and we stay out the fucking kitchen like our mamas told us, and we refuse lemons and corridos in solidarity. Except when we are completely wasted drunk. Then we can listen to El Rey and drink Victoria and embrace our stretched-soul, befuddled, half-ass gritos. If you don't know the words to El Rey because you don't speak Spanish, just make up nonsense words and sing the hook because you've been drinking and you love that shit. You speak better Spanish when drunk anyways, or you only speak it drunk because sober you doesn't want that colonizer's language. You ain't about colonizing the self. You're about decolonizing your consciousness, your morality, your diet, your love. Speaking of pain, come listen to Amor Eterno and step on each other's dirty Converse. Let's be resentful about how we didn't have a quinceañera and forget that we never wanted one until we were sophomores in state colleges when we took a Chicano studies class and gave ourselves a Nahuatl name and joined Mecha. Let's never mention how we thought the big dresses and gold chains and placas were tacky, or how we're too ashamed to wear anything that makes us look proud of ourselves. Oh, what? You're having a baby shower and your son is turning 2? Come celebrate at Pocha Cafe with our never-ending beer package. You have a padrino for the beer, right? We might be understaffed, but your children know how to garnish your beers, we're sure. In fact, they might be drinking already because some primo you call Johnny or Mike or Bill, but whose real names are Juan and Miguel and Guillermo, are telling them to be a man or trying to get them drunk so they can kiss them behind your Theo's work truck in the driveway while everyone is in the backyard listening to 2 Live Crew. Come to Pocha Cafe and expropriate your pochaism as an act of empowerment. Let's compliment each other on how articulate we are, like white teachers at school. Fuck it. Let's listen to country music and sing cry. Let's mess up the cholo handshake because even our muscle memory forgot our bodies, and this way our folks can feel better about themselves when they judge us. Orale. Simón. Let's find affinity in canned menudo and cilantro with the stems all up in it. In the pig's foot that grosses out half of us and makes the other half of us feel Mexican for once. Gather up all your impurities, your anglicized names, all your anxiety attacks and bad accents, your scraps of culture and half-bred shame, and put on your dickies and your gold loop earrings, and come lend us your broken Spanish. Come get drunk enough to tell your dad you love him, and your brother-in-law to finally fuck off. Come be the part of yourself that scares the entire family. All you pochas, you might know who you are. Okay, hopefully I bring us out of the depths. I'm gonna read one more poem, and then I would love to hear some questions, if anybody has any. I'm gonna read a new poem that I wrote recently. well, I was at my first artist residency, and I'm still kind of working on it, but I don't know. It's the first poem I've written since the book that I actually like really care about and feel like there's something in it. So while it might not be done, I would like to read it tonight to you guys. So it's called I'm So White. I'm so white, I got straight A's, chose French class over Spanish. When I finally took Spanish, I got all the homework wrong because my mom said the teacher's Spanish was all messed up. I was so white, I hated tacos. I was so white, I hated beans. I was so white, I thought I was dirty. I was so white, I stopped playing softball so it wouldn't get dark in the summer. I was so white, I called my friend Carlos midnight because he was hella dark. I'm so white, I don't think it's a big deal. I'm so white, I conflate being Latinx with being Black. I'm so white, I never give props to Black people for the oldies that make me feel like myself. I was so white, I was afraid of the dark. I was so white, I'm still afraid of the dark. I'm so white, I'm afraid of people like any people. I'm so white, I'm afraid of even poor white people. I'm so white, I'm staring at a lake right now, writing a poem. I'm so white, I'm wearing a cardigan with pearls on it. I'm so white, I only ever dated white boys in my teens. I'm so white, I never thought about why I only ever dated white boys in my teens. I'm so white, I was thankful for my white boyfriends who cried for Black people and migrants in cages. I'm so white, I like to read poems about Black people and migrants in cages. I'm so white, I'm super angry right now. I'm so white, I'm angry at white people. I'm so white, I'm not even exhausted yet. I'm so white, you should listen to this one podcast. I'm so white, my syllabus is the same every year, but I will never ever get fired. I'll get tenure. I'm so white, I say racist shit about white women not winning the Pulitzer or being eclipsed by poets of color and cry in my beautiful home and use my book contracts to wipe my tears. I'm so white, I'm really uncomfortable right now. I'm so white, I think my discomfort might be suffering. I'm so white, actually, I am suffering. I'm so white, I am an individual. I'm so white, I want to know how I can help, but know that I'm asking as an individual. I'm so white, we got to do better, I say. I'm so white, I'm having an identity crisis right now. I'm so white, I don't even know where I came from, but I could look it up. I'm so white, when people tell me to go back, I say to where? I'm from here. I forget research even exists. I'm so white, like now more than ever. I'm so white, I say people voted for Trump based on economic issues. I'm so white, I defend white people I never met or will never meet and will never know. I'm so white, I stand up for poor white people over Black, Latinx, AAPI, or Indigenous, or any other people who are also poor, but maybe who are not people. I'm so white, I'm crying in this meeting. I'm so white, I'm crying in this meeting. I'm so white, I'm crying in this meeting next to this beautiful lake. I'm so white, only my friends of color can console me. I'm so white, I look to nature so I'm not distracted by what's going on. I'm so white. Did you know my daughter is in college and very political? I'm so white, I'm relieved to be at this artist residency so I can take up the work at hand. I'm so white, I see trees and think about dignity, and I think I deserve to think about trees. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Let us hear the applause, the real
I know
applause.
you're like, are you out there?
I know, yeah. It's hard on Zoom, right? It's like you see the emojis. Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes. Wow. I'm so happy you shared a new poem with us as well. That was extremely powerful. And thank you so much, I mean, for your reading, great selections from the book. And I know that we have some questions prepared for you. So I want to give us a chance to open up the Q&A period now. So if you do have a question, if you want to actually ask it directly, verbally, just please use the little hand raise function on Zoom. And of course, you're welcome to put the questions into the chat as well. So I see we already have a hand up from Raymond. So Raymond, if you want to go ahead and ask Sarah.
Hello, Sarah. First of all, phenomenal work. Enjoyed your readings. I wanted to ask, when you first got on, you mentioned that you were a Fresno poet. I want to know, is that a cultural thing? Is that like a product of your own environment, or is that an actual style of poetry? And how does it differ from like being a San Diego poet, for lack of a better term?
Right. Thanks for asking, Raymond. Thanks for saying that. You know what? I didn't even know there was such a thing as like a Fresno poet, like a clique going down, until like I was already like practicing poetry. And then somebody had like asked me like, oh, how do you feel about the responsibility of being a Fresno poet? And I was like, what are you talking about, fool? Like, what do you mean? Like, what is that supposed to mean? They're like, there are a lot of, like canonical, like seminal poets in the United States that are from Fresno. And I just didn't know that. But, like Larry Levis, Juan Felipe Herrera, right now, Joseph Rios, there's so many poets from Fresno. And I guess it's kind of like, people are always like, what's in the water? And I'm like, pesticides. I don't, I don't know. But, so Fresno poets, I guess it's like a thing where it's like, if you're from the Central Valley, there's a history of us. And I didn't know till like I was already doing this shit. But so now sometimes I kind of feel like, oh, well, like, is it my responsibility to like evolve myself, but at the same time feeling like I need to evolve this collective group, right? And that's why I always confront and think about, like, in the Ars Poetica poem I read, it's like, well, if I didn't know about it, am I responsible for it? And now that I do know about it, am I now responsible for it? And I don't know, it's just something I'm figuring out. Those of us who are writing, who don't read ourselves growing up or in school until like we're already publishing poems, then you look back and they're like, oh, you're like Sharon Moraga, or you're like this person, but you really have not been exposed to them. I think that's probably, I'm not the only person of color who, but what do I do with it now that I know? I'm just figuring it out. I say you just start the San Diego Poets and like see what happens.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to second the start the San Diego Poets, or continue the San Diego Poets. All right, Raymond, thank you so much for your question. Let's see, Jorge, I think, had the hand up next.
Oh no, it was Brent. I don't want to jump ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Brent, jump on in.
Hi.
What's up, Brent?
How are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I had a couple quick questions for you, if you don't mind. I was wondering, first, if you could speak a little bit about CantoMundo, and if you have any insight on that. And then also, kind of maybe you can elaborate more on this. Every time I look at your book, I'm always drawn to the poem, "We Are Too Big for This House." And it's probably just because it pulls me in, and the fact that it covers the whole page. Can you talk a little bit about the formal choices that you made with that poem?
Sure. But Brent, I missed the first part of your first question. What window part?
Oh, sorry. I was asking about CantoMundo.
Oh, CantoMundo.
if you had any information or insight or anything you can say about it.
Mm-hmm. So I'll say, so for those of us too who don't know, like anybody who doesn't know what CantoMundo is, it's a literary organization that fosters, nurtures, cultivates Latinx poetry in the United States. And it's modeled after Kundiman and Cave Canem, ultimately. So Cave Canem is an organization that fosters Black poets, and Kundiman, Asian American, Pacific Islander poets. So CantoMundo, historically, I mean, has been very, you know, some homies in the kitchen in Texas were like, yo, we should make this thing and get institutional support so that we can begin to like pull people up the ladder, right? We understand that we're working in a white centered industry, as all industries are, you know, here. And how do we work towards equity? So CantoMundo does a yearly retreat where they accept applicants. It tends to be, you know, there's a lot of us. So there's like one organization and there's like hella Latinx people in the United States. So there, it gets mad competitive. But what you end up doing if you get accepted is you become part of this community, you go to the retreat, you work with other poets, and you just build this like intergenerational network. And it's really, 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 it changed my whole perception of myself. I didn't have to go there and explain anything. And then I get to like be myself and actually push into the challenging confrontations I want to have with myself, rather than getting exhausted with explications before I even knock on the door, you know? And so it's dope. It's great we have it. And like, there doesn't have to be just one CantoMundo. You know, there should be many CantoMundos. There shouldn't be one Cave Canem. There should be many Cave Canems. I think, if I'm being honest, when George Floyd was murdered last year, I think a lot of organizations, Poetry Magazine, you guys know your departments, they really we're all having a reckoning out, but we are still having a and that includes CantoMundo. So I think under transformations, long needed and long overdue. You know, I think sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time, Latinx folks, that is not the case. You know, hence why I confront and talk about whiteness a lot, because it's all I'm really probably forever going to be contending with my whiteness. And so CantoMundo's there, and I would watch to see what they do. And I'd also, if you're interested, that sounds appealing to you, Vona's another place you can look to and kind of see what happens around there. As far as it's actually an essay, and I wrote that way because I wrote the essay because my publisher was like, yo, I don't understand why this speaker is really resentful, but really tender at the same time. And a lot of the poems weren't resonating. And I kept trying to write the poem that I felt I needed to write to explain that. And I still can't do it. Like, it's just too hard for me. I'm just emotionally not capable right now. I don't know if I'll ever be, but she's like, well, why don't you write an essay? So I was like, okay, that sounds more approachable. So I wrote it in vignettes, and it seemed, but the problem with the vignettes is that it just had this like linear like causation pattern, and that's also not true. So what I ended up doing was writing like narrative and thoughts in the middle in columns, and at the same time like commenting and kind of creating like a meta narrative on the outside, so that every time you went down and read, I had to also confront like all the ideas, you know, all the doubts you have, especially like, I think for me specifically as a Chicana, when I feel like undermined and dismissed from everywhere I go, you know? So I'm constantly checking myself, like, is that right? Well, why is that? Well, is this? And then everything affects everything. And so it's a little bit of like a double consciousness that I could formally show in the text, but that I think is a lived experience for me. Like I'm doing it right now, doing it right now. But this was like the best formal choice I can make, that honored like the various narratives and the various perceptions, and also like dismissals I think Chicanas do of themselves, and everybody does of themselves. But this form seemed to satisfy me, and it let everything, it holds everything, everything's true at once. And so I feel good with it where it is, but we might edit it down the line. We'll see.
Great. Thank you so much for such a in-depth response, and thank you for the reading too. That was great.
Thanks, Brent.
All right, great question. Yeah, we had a good discussion on that poem in the class, so I'm glad you had a chance to explicate and give us some backdrop on that. Okay, so Jorge up next, and then Becky will go after.
Hey, I just have a quick question about more or less like a cultural question.
Sure.
From like one Chicano to Chicanx, why do you feel that we have like such a fascination and like such an attachment to like older genres of music and like oldies like R&B, funk, and all that stuff? Like, do you think that it's more than just like the musical like pleasing content or like the lyrical content? I always like to hear like what other like Chicanos, Chicanx like people like think about this, because it's such a recurring like theme and like creative works.
Dude, I always think about this. I always think about this. Oh man. I always think about this, and I think part of the book, and like a lot of poems that didn't make it in the book, but poems that I have are just like, yo, why do I feel most myself when I'm crying about how a motherfucker doesn't love me right? Why that is like the most Mexican I feel, and and I think what I feel like I come with my experience is that, like, for me, like this cultural value of like just sacrificial love, like self-sacrificial love, and I think those oldies and those R&B songs and like baby don't leave me please, like I think it seems to align with the idea that like we are supposed to, if we love you right, sacrifice everything about ourselves, our individuality, right? Our hopes, our personalities, our desires. Like we don't get them, not if we really love you, and I think oldies, especially, they just kind of match. But I think like for me, they also were really warped me, so that when I did try to love, and I do try to love like presently, it's hard because my expectations are set to be this like really romanticized, we are one, if you love me, it should hurt, and it's really hard now as like a grown ass person to revise something that I never articulated, but I felt it, like I felt it. And like there's an essay that Viet Thanh Nguyen wrote, but he said in the essay, he's like at the store and here's a dad calling his son and asking him in Vietnamese, like, have you eaten rice today? And Viet's like, I don't really speak Vietnamese like that anymore. I didn't know, but I felt it. It moved me. And he says like, I know I'm Vietnamese because I'm moved by Vietnamese things, and I feel like when I listen to oldies, I don't know, I can't articulate exactly what it is, but I know that I'm moved by it. And I know that it culturally aligns with our ideas and my ideas that I was raised with about love. The thing I'm having a problem with now is not realizing or understanding most of my life that I owe those songs that make me feel most myself to Black people. especially with all the racism and anti-Blackness in my family and, you know, with Latinx communities. So now I'm like, oh shit, do I get to be proud? Like, what do I actually have to do? You know, all this time I thought I was being woke. Well, guess what? I'm not. I'm learning like everybody else. But that's kind of like the next thing I think about is like, okay, if that's true, then what do I owe Black people? What do we all owe Black people? And that's just something I'm thinking about, I guess, now moving forward. Thanks for asking me about that too, because like I said, I really geek out on it.
Thank you so much for answering.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. And for your honesty, I mean, just overall, it's such a delight to just talk to you. Or, I mean, well, through this virtual forum.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that sort of veracity comes through in your poems as well. And I feel that's, you know, one of the things that we really gravitated toward is just you kind of, we feel at home in your poems.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really appreciated that.
Thank you.
All right, Becky has a question.
Hi, thanks for coming tonight.
Becky, thank you.
My question was more about your process. You have such like a unique, different way of writing each of your poems. Is your process, do you write on your computer or do you handwrite on paper? How is your process? Do you set time aside and write, or do you just write when it comes to you?
I just write when it comes to me. I just write when it comes to me, and the only time I haven't really done that is when I've been on a deadline. And that's just real. You know, like I started writing poems because I took a class. Like I took an elective and I had to write poems that like I wrote them because like they were due. You know what I mean? I wasn't like, it was never, I don't know, it didn't feel like an option to me. You know, it didn't feel like I'm going to be a poet, like I was going to go to law school, right? And so like, it wasn't necessarily when I was younger, like setting aside the time. I just did it because I had to, you know? And when I started revising this book, that is the only time I wrote every motherfucking day. You know, I wrote every day for a little over a year, like a year and like 3 months. And I wrote every day, like for like 8 hours. And it really tore me up, you know. I think something that's like, we don't talk about too, is like how much a first book will mess you up. Because I think a lot of first books are really opening that not initial, but in that wound that we're gonna, you know, be, you know, trying to heal the rest of our lives. I didn't know that. I thought I was just writing poems, but you know, when I was doing it every day, it was fucking hard. And it's been 2 years, and I'm, you know, some people are in here who I talk to, they know I'm just coming out of it. You know, that's why I was like, I gotta read a new poem, because I'm just happy to have a new poem. You know, and as far as process, like once I actually sit down, I usually will just write like a sloppy paragraph of that. And it's usually because I'm feeling something intensely, you know, or I have like a question that's really bothering me and I need to like have a conversation with it, you know, and see what the problem is. And so I'll write a first draft longhand a lot of times. Sometimes I'll use my laptop. And then if I feel like I want to work on it, I'll write a second draft, but a lot of times they just stay that way. But I do find that like, I feel like that process of drafting it that way, it kind of prioritizes and privileges the energy that can come in a first draft, which can very easily get revised out, especially in a workshop setting. When you're having a lot of contending aesthetics, not necessarily, you know, promoting or advocating for the intention of the poet, because sometimes the poet doesn't even know either, you know? So I just write when I feel like it, and I usually like need to write.
Thank you. I feel like that's really helpful advice. It's interesting to hear you say, I mean, the process of this first book was a really heart-wrenching and continues to be a wrenching process. And I'm wondering if you could just maybe, and then I know we have a couple hands up, but speak more about the process of like just birthing that book, and maybe what it takes to, once it's been out in the world and you've been doing these readings, what it maybe takes to begin to separate yourself and to move on to like the next thing, whatever that thing is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like I can't, that's the thing, Megan, I can't separate myself. Like, I can't, 2 years ago, I would have said like, I am the speaker. Like, you know, I'm not gonna lie, like I says Narcissus, but it's me, you know, it's me. But I have never felt, I'm 34. I have never felt until this moment that I was not the speaker in anything I ever wrote. Even that was the hard part, because especially when I wrote poems like in my mom's voice, I was like, this is not ethical. I know it's not, and I don't know why. And it's taken me so long to write these people, but I always like having to make sure it's clear that I'm writing it from my perspective and I am not them. Because I don't want to appropriate or betray or exploit my own family, you know, who I love, but who artists we can very easily do, you know. And now it's only now this year, you know, I'm 34, where I'm starting to kind of feel like I am starting to be able to detach from the speaker. And so like the new drafts I'm writing, I'm more able to take on like a tone, I think, or an attitude that isn't necessarily my honest one, but it's a part of me at the same time, but I'm able to like accentuate it. And I think I'm maybe accentuating that because I'm trying to have fun, because I'm trying to play and I'm trying to experiment. I'm trying to have fun. Because I need to like stay mentally healthy right now. And as far as like the next thing, you know, I think when I started writing, like I said, I never thought like I was just writing on a deadline. I wasn't writing a book, but at some point I just had enough and it felt like a book, and it felt, you know, I didn't know a book was an option for me for a long time. So I was never writing a book. You know, now that I understand that I can write a book, if I happen to have poems that make sense in a book, then I'll like put them together, but I really don't have any plans. I know like that's not probably like the professional answer, but but it's real. I don't, if I feel the need to write, I will do it, but I won't write for the hell of it, or because, you know, I don't, well, the last thing I would want to do is pretend like something means something to me that much that actually doesn't, and then I'm only doing because I feel like I should do it or people are expecting me to do it. And I hope that like I'm gonna write poems because I feel like poems are just ways for me to like be a better person. You know, I'm writing about my mom and trying to figure out why the hell she's doing this stuff that she's doing, because I'm trying to love her all the way. And I'm trying to like understand myself and why I have these like aversions and things. And so in my attempt to be a better person, like I'm writing poems. And if those poems end up being something like a project or a book, cool. Like I'm gonna be super excited, but I try to just kind of like sit back and not make any plans. But we'll see what happens.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I think I may have muted you. I meant to unmute myself and then I just muted you. Well,
Okay.
I really appreciate that answer. And because I think we're looking for like not the professional or like that canned, you know, expected response, but the real visceral response.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, I don't know, maybe you've had this experience before, like reading poets, like second and third books that maybe sometimes just don't have that energy that the first book has, you know, because maybe they feel like they have to keep producing or they're on some sort of schedule with the publisher. And So I feel like the realness, the good stuff we really want to sink our teeth into is the process, you know, like what you're doing, like writing when you feel like you need to write, wrestling through things that you need to wrestle, you know, through, figuring them out on the page. And then if that, you know, makes something that speaks to others, then that's great.
Yeah, great. And if not, like, I'll keep like teaching and writing these union contracts. I think you can catch me over there, you know?
I know, yes. All right, well, so thank you for that. I think Gio has a question.
Sure.
Hi. So yeah, I wanted to touch back on like, so when I read this, you know, I kind of did get a sense of home feeling too when I read some of the passages, and I feel like I noticed that there's several mentions of different types of foods. What kind of, you know, to someone who's not familiar, they'll get a taste of the culture. For me, you know, I thought of like I saw menudo, caldo de res, and I thought about like how warm that'd make you feel as I'm reading this. But you know, I kind of wanted to see if is there a distinct connection between that and like being labeled as pocha, right? It's almost like if you think about it, like the way I saw it, it's the oils and water. I mean, it's obviously they're separating each other. They don't really mix. If you ever seen caldo de res, you always see the little bit of oil on the top.
Yeah.
And it's although the only, you know, it's a bowl of water and oil and fats. The only thing that makes it caldo de res and one is the bowl. You know, is that fair enough to say that that'd be kind of being as kind of like a channeling of what it is to be pocha, you know, in the sense of you embody everything, but you're not distinguished as one or the other.
Definitely.
Like, yeah.
And I'm so glad like that's being intuited by other folks who know, you know, like you are my audience, like you are the person I'm addressing, you know. And so like the fact that we can connect, or we never have met each other is dope, you know. And the other thing is like, you know, I think, like I said, like I don't feel I was so ashamed of being brown like for so long, and then when I finally like took a class where I read folks that like look like mine and sound like mine, I was like, oh, okay, so I can put these things, but I had already developed like this fear of like being identified as brown and then also being pigeonholed as like a Latinx poet or a Latinx writer. So at first I was like, hey, you would never find any mention of food in any of my poems. I was like, hell no, because I'm going to get pigeonholed and I'm not going to be American writer, you know, all this stuff. And it didn't matter what I did. Only I found out over here, it didn't matter what I did. I'm going to get read for my body before I'm getting read for my work. It doesn't matter. And so what's the point of being ashamed and hiding it? There's an essay by Carmen Jimenez Smith called Let's Make America Mongrel Again. And she really honors and takes guidance from this dude, Jose Esteban Munoz. He's a queer Latinx theorist. In this book, it's called The Sense of Brown. But he talks about, you know, if you're going to be stereotyped anyways, no matter what, why not use those, you know, what he says in the book and essays are, you know, Latino is stereotyped as excess, being too much this, being too loud, being too blah, blah, blah. And so if they're going to do that to you anyways, then why not take that before they can take it and weaponize it and use it as an offense instead? And Carmen says in her essay, like, they're going to call me extra anyways. And they're right. So instead of letting them play the race card and stereotype out on me, I'm going to do it first. And then in that term, make a what's it called? A spectacle of the white gaze that is expecting me to do that at the same time. And I'm really fascinated and love the idea of subverting the white gaze. And so I try to like take food and be like, yeah, dude, I'm sad and I'm fucking rolling around in hot Cheetos in my bed crying over a man. Like, yeah, it's true. You know, I eat hell tamales, and like I also use it. I use it to like feel comfortable, and I also use it to explain the complicated nature of my ethnicity, like any colonized person. And something that Jose Esteban Munoz says, you know, he's like, if we understand Latino and Latina as excess, it's excess to what? You know, and there's this like he calls it like the normative, which is whiteness, which if Latino is excess, then whiteness is lacking, like the neutrality of whiteness is, it just really doesn't have any effect. It's almost impoverished, he says, so that anything seen other than any effect becomes extra. And so I use the food on purpose where I use it, and to hopefully like kind of make it clear that I understand that this is a cultural marker. I understand it's going to be read this way. I also understand that you expect me to say it's not. I also understand that I have to account for my own shame and my own complicity in the white gaze as I'm talking about my own life. So like food's really fun. So on another note, it's just really fun to like get political with, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely like, I mean, the references kind of made me have almost like flashbacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
You start thinking about the molcajete, and I can think about just making my, you know, learning how to do it the first time, and then so on. And then small little references I think of is like, oh, if someone's pregnant, have them sit on the matete.
Yeah.
Not the molcajete, but the metate. And then so if someone sits on a metate, they'll have a boy. And if not, you know, so there's little things like, I mean, we probably don't even use it for making tortillas or doing, you know, getting the corn done. But it's like little things like that that you can kind of, as a reader, I can definitely identify with. But I feel like it's a nice, it's letting the reader kind of peer through a window. You know, if someone has no idea what that type of, you know, that culture can bring.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks for noticing.
All right. So I think, you know, we're maybe getting to that point where we're going to turn into little Zoom pumpkins. But I thought, you know, we could end with a question. We've been talking in my class a lot about community and just literary citizenship. And I think, Sarah, when we look at your work and you just, I mean, you go through the notes section and you can see that you just have this kind of wide array of maybe poets, artists, other writers who seem to inspire you. I mean, you have the David St. John, Eduardo Corral, Francis Driscoll, Jose Olivares, you have Juan Felipe Herrera, and I mean, just kind of the list goes on. And then also just your experience with CantoMundo. And then there was a question too in the chat about like who your mentors are. And so, I mean, I was just kind of wrapping this all together and wondering if you could speak a little bit to either the, you know, the importance of community or just the significance of community as a writer or, you know, as a Chicanx or, you know, sort of anything, how you identify that term.
Yeah, definitely. I think as far as like community goes, like community is the most important part of a writer's life. Like it's definitely the most important part of my life. And if it wasn't for like the homies I made at school, if it wasn't for the people who like edited my work, who tell me the truth, I would not be here at all, you know? And I think when I was in grad school, it was, I don't know, I think the poets are different. Like the poets were more down, like the poets, like we'd be on the roof, like playing a keyboard and a guitar and singing The Cure and chain smoking cigarettes, you know, when we were supposed to be like editing poems, you know, there was like it was an undeniable type of like learning by being in a community with each other, no matter where we were. while a lot of the other, I feel like other genres would be like, well, I'm here to write. You know, I moved from New York. I'm here to write. I'm here to finish my book. I'm here to finish my novel. And it was just a different way of kind of holding community. But I'm really grateful that I fell into the poets and have developed along as a poet, because poets really like hold you in all you are, not just when you're a writer, but when your mom dies, you know, when you're going through some shit, when you're having a fight with your boss, when you're go through a breakup. Like, it's, you hold each other in all those ways. And if we're not, like, if I'm not healthy, like, I can't write, because I definitely can't go through all that and then go write a poem about it. Like, it's so complicated. And so I'm really grateful for poets, the generosity of the poetry community. You know, then down the road, you know, you do work, you know, in universities, institutions, and you have this community behind you. So, you know, like, somebody teaches here, hey, do you want to come read? We have a series. Somebody's in this organization, hey, do you want to come through? You get jobs that way, because if people remember your generosity. And I have friends who are the ones who are like, I'm here to write my novel. And they're like, how come you got that job? How come you did this? How come you did that? Like, because they know I'm down. They know I'm down. They know I'm in it for the art and for the community, not for anything else. And so community is like central in so many different ways. As far as like mentors go, I mean, I have mentors like that I meet every day. Like, my students, honestly, are my mentors. Like, some of them are here. Like, they teach me so much just by letting me and trusting me with their work, and letting me see them arrive the way they're arriving when they're doing it. And it's like my colleagues and my, like, Carla, my best friend, Angel Garcia, all the poets that are writing right now, those are my, like, mentors. I watch them, you know, as their friend, but I also, like, I'm so inspired by them all the time. You know, Eduardo Corral, I don't know if he's still here, but he was in here, you know, like, his work, Slow Lightning, his first book, just changed the whole game, I think, just for queer brown folks, you know. And other people like Jose Esteban Munoz now, like queer Latinx theorist, Carmen Jimenez Smith, Roque Dalton, who's dead now, but is just a beautiful, political, sentimental, funny poet. I think the Latin American poets that we don't know about, we're really missing out, you know. And I'm really, now that I'm figuring it out, doing my due diligence to reach back. And I'm reading like everything that Audre Lorde read. I'm reading everything that Bell Hooks wrote. I'm reading all of Octavia Butler. Now that I'm starting to understand that, like, this whole nation was built on Blackness, I'm understanding how much I'm missing out. We're all missing out if we don't understand that and nurture it either. And so, like, every day I'm learning, every day there's a poem and I'm like, I lose it. And that's like, you know, people say like, oh, it's fucked up to write right now. It's really hard. It's like writer's block. It's like, it is. But if you watch the people around you, like your students, your colleagues, other poets, it gets way easier. It's way easier. Like, when you're not alone, it's way easier. And so, like, as long as I'm writing like into love or loving something, or I pretty much don't have writer's block.
Well, thank you for that. And I mean, speaking of community and just I think the idea of literary citizenship, right? It's part of that is championing the work of others and sharing that stuff with your friends. And I have to give a shout out to Carla Cordero, who introduced me to your work, and who's been giving me good suggestions. And so I feel like that's also a really great part of having that community, is that, you know, just having those suggestions come through, like when you need them, or just, you know, having your back, and in that sense. And so I feel like if we could end with just maybe a little bit of advice for those who maybe are looking to find a community, or maybe those who might be outside of academia but want to find their way into a writing community, is there any advice that you might give them, or, something that you might be able to share.
Yeah, man, I would say like here's the easy, something you can do right now is go and like on Instagram and follow, there's a handle called Poetry is Not a Luxury. And whoever this beautiful person is always dropping beautiful, dope poems all day. And if you want just like a daily dose, Poetry is Not a Luxury. I would follow, oh man, CAP. It's the Center for African American Poetry, I think. But they're always like hosting these like forward thinking, like, forward thinking / yo, we've always been here, readings and like seminars. I would follow CAP. I would follow any poets that you dig, like if you read them in class or anybody, follow them, find them, because what you'll do is you'll see them pumping up other poets that they like. And it's a really easy way to just kind of get into the know. I think there's a couple anthologies that are really helpful too. One is Latinx. This is by Haymarket. Haymarket puts out a lot of anthologies. There's it's the Breakbeat Poetry series. I think there's like 4 or 5 volumes. In Haymarket, they always have 50% off too on all the books. So catch them. You get the whole anthology for like $11, and then you can go through and access so many dope poets. And then the other thing is too, the Poem a Day. The Academy of American Poets has a Poem a Day series where they email you one poem every day. Monday through Friday is a new poem. Weekends are old school poems. Every month they have a different editor, and so you'll see editing choices, and you'll see that type of change too, which is also part of, like you said, Megan, like literary citizenship and what we can expose and do when we're in any type of little place of power. But those are ways you can get poems like on the daily. And then once you're on IG, you can find readings like this one. You can follow me. I'm always trying to, I'm always doing some shit, so you can catch me here. And yeah, that's a really good way, and you can do it now.
Well, thank you again. That was just a wealth of wonderful suggestions that you said and throw into the chat. And I'm gonna just put the Living Writers and the SDSU community site back into the chat too. Anyone is welcome to be a part of our community. And I think one thing, though, it sucks not being together in person, but I think being able to unite on these sort of virtual platforms has expanded our communities in many ways. And I'm hoping that we can find ways to kind of keep this going after we go back to whatever, normal looks like, and we can be together again. So Sara, I just want to thank you so much for the beautiful reading, all of the information that you gave out, the advice you shared, the just the insight. Really, it's been a delightful evening. So let's give Sara another round of applause. Real applause if you want.
Thank you.
All right.
It's really nice to have you guys not be alone for the night. Thank you.
I know, what a better way to spend a Wednesday evening.
A Wednesday night, I know.
Yeah.
Solid now.
Yeah, it's lit on a Wednesday night. Yes.
Exactly.
All right, thank you to Sara, and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. I hope to see you at other events, and just keep writing, and keep going. Follow Sara and all the other examples that she threw into the chat there. And get home safe. Don't trip when you get out of your chair and leave your room. And have a good rest of your night, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.